Let's talk about high achievers. I grew up in a household that was very performance and achievement based. And I don't say that negatively because so many good things about who I am came from that upbringing. 5 of us sisters growing up. 3 of those girls, including me, ended up playing college basketball on scholarship. One of my sisters was a college cheerleader, and the other one actually didn't go to college, but is now at the top 1% of luxury real estate in Denver. So I think she's doing just fine. My whole point is that growing up this way, so many positives, but when there's good, there's always gotta be drawbacks too. So in this video, I'm gonna talk about what high achievers struggle with, right? Sometimes high achievers have to maintain the image of perfection, so they're probably not talking about this. I have some experience in this of positive effects and then negative effects. I've definitely experienced some of it as I've had a transition period in this last year and a half. If you want to know more about that, I've got a video here. So I'm gonna be sharing some of my personal experience towards the end of the video and what I've learned and what I've kind of wrestled with and what's been hard for me coming from that high achiever background and then stepping into a transition period and how I survived. Essentially. So we're gonna start off with a story. So in high school, I had a goal to get all A's in high school. So it was either my junior or senior year. And I remember walking out of my math class, realizing I might get an A-. How would I go on? So naturally I called up my mom, right? What would you do when you're 16 and the earth is shattering before you? And I called my mom and I was hysterically crying. She said, Lindsey, where are you? Did you get in a car accident? That's how bad I sounded on the phone. And I said, no, I found out I might get an A- in my math class. Mama almost hung up the phone on her youngest baby. Looking back on that, I realized that although I put in hard work to achieve some of these goals that were in my mind, and I was reaching those goals, kind of always attaining that and getting what I wanted made me fragile in certain instances, which I did not recognize at the time because you look back and you go, oh, when people achieve things, they're tough and they're smart and they can seem untouchable, right? When you're achieving things. But in actuality, if you're used to always getting or hitting the mark and then you don't, you're not used to dealing with the aftermath or the consequences that come with that. And so you're very low on ammunition and armor to be able to combat that. So that is one that comes to my mind crystal clear, where I was very fragile in that moment. Now, because I know you're all waiting with bated breath, it actually came down to an attendance score that I actually had a tardy slip for, that the attendance office lost. Doesn't matter. Graduated with my 4.0 with plenty to still learn about resilience and the ability to continue to move forward through obstacles. And I think the way to combat that and make yourself less fragile, because I don't think it's bad to have goals and to be a high achiever, but to make yourself a little bit more robust and have the ability to accept and deal with falling short and not being the best in the room is to try different things that you haven't mastered. So I'm dealing with this with my 11-year-old right now. He's got a heart of gold. He loves sports. He loves being active, but I'm noticing about him that he's got his few things that he knows that he's pretty good at. So if that's football, baseball, wake surfing, but we saw this at the lake last week, is that his cousin's really good at water skiing. And my brother-in-law teaching all the kids to water ski. And my little boy has less experience doing it. So he's not as good as his cousin at this. So what is he doing? He's John.
Water skiing sucks. Surfing's where it's at.
So I recognize this was his defense mechanism. And he didn't want to do the things that he wasn't that good at. But guess what? He got in the water, he got encouragement, he got instruction. He popped right up, and by the end of the week, he was doing slalom skiing. All of a sudden, it was really, really fun to him. So that can be a lesson, that put ourselves in environments where we're not the top dog so that we can feel that component of being a little lower on the totem pole in certain scenarios and situations so that we know how to be resilient and how to deal when we don't get that A+, 10 out of 10 high achiever mark. It's going to make us more well-rounded and resilient overall. I actually had a tinge of this before I started this YouTube channel, and I don't have a ton of subscribers yet. I came from a platform, Instagram, where I had built over 100,000 in my community. It would have been my safest bet not to try a new platform. But as I'm growing in business, and I'll be 37 next month.
I mean, I'm so wise and old.
I've decided to throw any of that ego crap out the window, and I the number one thing I want to do is to create and to learn. So I don't care that I don't have thousands and thousands of subscribers, but hey, while we're talking about it, like hit that subscribe and like button. Would really love that. But I think that that's the whole point, is the point is to grow and to try. And when you get to the top of that S curve, I've got another video all about pivots and transition times. Get to the top of that S curve, you've mastered something. You can't stay safe and just stay up there, right? You've got to come back down and start over and do something that you suck at in order to grow and get more skills in your tool belt, in your arsenal. So my little boy Brody, who's 11, me at 36, almost 37, we're all still learning and trying to grow in this way of putting yourselves in environments and situations where you're not the top dog. Another thing that high achievers struggle with is perfectionism. Recovering perfectionist here. So it's really great because you have attention to detail and you're so invested in making something awesome that a lot of the times that's what sets your business or your athletic ability or your academic ability apart, because you're so invested, like way more than the rest of the 95%, right? So it's not a bad thing to have that attention to detail and that perfectionism, but where it becomes more of a negative than a positive is when you can't let go at all and you can't delegate at all. You can't function in a team because you're the only one that can do stuff. That really decreases other people's work culture, their team culture, and the ability that they have to feel reward, number one. Number two, it really limits your ability to grow the company and to scale. If you have to have your hand, your fingerprint, your eyes on every single move that's made, every decision that's done, you're going to get so burned out and everybody else is going to hate working with you. So I think it's a really fine balance of like not losing that attention to detail that makes brands, products, teams so amazing. You don't want to lose that, but you've got to find that in between where you still can have room to delegate. I think like Mark Cuban says, like it's the 80%. Like if you can't like be happy at an 80% level with someone else's work inside your company or brand, you're just never going to grow it, right? It might be closer to like a 60 to 80%, but you kind of understand the concept of what I'm saying there. Here's the part where I'm going to share my experience the last like year and a half. I think high achievers get used to a certain type of feedback. They have a big effort and they get a return or feedback. In this case, I think it can be biofeedback because it's kind of like dopamine hits, right? When we put all the work in. So examples would be like, I'm posting consistently on social media, I'm using the right tactics, I'm getting followers and comments. Dopamine hit, nice transaction, right? Other examples would be in sports, I train every day and then I score the winning goal in the game on Saturday. And that gives me a big dopamine hit and rush and adrenaline. And I go, oh, I'm gonna keep that behavior because then I get this nice transaction and it's tangible. I prepare for a webinar for my digital product. If you want to know about webinars, I've got a video here. And I really nail the pitch. I get great sales conversions. All of a sudden, I've got a bunch more revenue in my bank account. So for me personally, I feel like this transactional feedback happened to me as an athlete, as a student, and then in learning to scale and then selling my very own business. So then after I transitioned out of the company that bought mine, this is about a year ago now, I had an absence of that transactional feedback. One of my business coaches told me this. He said, hey, you better have a plan for when you exit out. Otherwise, you'll find yourself at the bar down the street drinking yourself to death. Now, Tony doesn't know I've never had a drink in my life, but I understood the sense of what he was saying, but I felt like that wouldn't be me and that wouldn't necessarily affect me. Then about 6 months into this in-between pivot transitional time, I started to understand exactly what Tony meant because there was a lack of that very tangible transactional feedback that was happening. I realized that some of my self-worth was based on that exchange. So even though logically I knew, hey, I'm a great wife, I'm a great mother to 3 kids, I still have all my knowledge and skills that I've built up through working at the hospital, starting my own business, getting all my certifications. Logically, I knew all of that, right? But because there was an absence of the feedback I was used to in a high achiever mindset, I felt like, where was my self-worth? And I felt like a little bit of an itch, like, well, I better get that back somehow. And I better clamor for, or am I relevant? Or all these things. I was like, wait a second. No, it doesn't make sense. It's just like, my self-worth and those transactions look different right now. Right now, I'm doing fantastic work inside my home and with my kids. Wow, and the feedback I'm getting is the hugs that they give me and that time we get playing cards at the table, and I get to coach their basketball teams, and I get to argue with them in the car during carpool. So for me, it was kind of reframing my efforts, and the transaction just looked different during this transitional period. Same thing with my husband and how I'm supporting him and he's supporting me. And those efforts are very valid and integral to our family and its functioning, our lives, but they look different than when you're doing transactions in business or on a sports field or court. So a huge aha that I've had in the last year is remembering to center my self-worth within who I am as a person, not the sales that I made in a webinar, not the strategic brand partnerships deals that I landed. It's about me as a person and the contributions I'm making with those that I interact with. So especially during times of transition, high achievers might struggle because they're used to a certain type of transitional and tangible feedback. So you're really going to have to take a step back and really center your self-worth within who you are and let go of that tangibility and let go of the structure of feedback you're used to. And you will have so much more peace and happiness even during those transition times. So let me know if I've got any other high achievers out there. Do you struggle with any of these things? Perfectionism, imposter syndrome, only wanting to be in scenarios where you know you can excel, any of those types of things. Let's be friends. Let's chat down below in the comments. See you in the next video.